Welcome to Habeas Treasures, where I try to decipher this book, There's Treasure Inside by Jon Collins Black, in order to find one of the 5 hidden treasures. On today's episode, I'll be continuing my breakdown of the Pokemon Box chapter. Let's begin. One of the most interesting puzzles in the Pokemon Box chapter is, who is the Froakie? This character appears on page 217 and is recruited by the author to help hide the treasure box. Now, in my previous videos, I make the case that I believe the author has hidden the Pokemon Box somewhere in New Orleans, and that the line, "We left the box not far from a place where locals turn up from time to time," might be the local streetcar stop at the corner of Elk Place and Common Street that heads uptown. So when the author writes on page 217 that I decided to go in search of a Pokemon who might be capable of assisting me on my trip, a Pokemon who might know the area I wanted to travel to, I decided to start looking for clues that could connect the Froakie to Elk Place. On page 217, he describes wanting to leave the box somewhere along his previous journey and writes, "Since it had been a long time ago, I figured it might be a fair bit of work." Well, I discovered that one of the sculptures that is on display in the middle of Elk Place is this one called The Source. It was created for the 1984 Louisiana World Exposition, which was also referred to as the 1984 World's Fair. The connection of the Source sculpture to a long time ago and a fair bit of work seems to make sense as a possible clue. Close to the Source sculpture, I found this monument to Molly Marine. Molly Marine is the first statue of a woman in uniform and was created in 1943. The statue was commissioned to help encourage women to enlist in the military in World War II. Now I think this statue is a clue to the identity of the Froakie, and here's why. First is the line in the book where the author writes, "His cute face reminded me of an army of croakers I had encountered on my trip long ago." Now, obviously Molly Marine has a cute face, but it's the combination of army of croakers that is more telling. Another word for croakers, especially in the military sense, could be frogmen. A frogman is someone who is trained in underwater combat, typically associated with the Navy, so the phrase Army of Frogmen could be referring to the Marines, which are a part of the United States Department of the Navy. The next line in the book also makes me think the author is making a reference to Molly Marine. Since I didn't feel right about capturing him, I used as much charm and enthusiasm as I could muster. Remember how Molly Marine is a statue designed to help recruit women into the military? Well, the author is trying to recruit the Froakie to join his mission. And the term muster is a military word used to form a military unit. For example, mustering in means to start a military unit, and mustering out means to disband one. A common nickname for Marines is jarhead. Could this be why he thinks the Froakie would enjoy a jar of flies? Maybe. Also, later in the story on page 218, after the Froakie abandons him, the author laments, "I wasn't sure quite what to do. Perhaps I overestimated my companion's reliability. Maybe the flies weren't really his preferred food. I took a deep breath and marched on." Maybe the reason he overestimated the Froakie's reliability is because the Marines' motto is Semper Fi, so the Froakie should have been always faithful. Also, the phrase marched on has a military flavor as well. Okay, before I conclude today's video, I'm going to cover one more potential clue from page 217, and this one, it's a real banger. In order to recruit the Froakie to join him, the author writes, "I told the Froakie all about the treasure box I needed to hide and asked if he might accompany me to help locate the best spot. He told me that he thought this was a grand idea and wanted to know when we would begin. How about now?" I responded with a smile. He nodded in agreement and off we went. Now, one of the things we know about the author is that he worked in the music business, and New Orleans has a vibrant music scene. Most people think of Louis Armstrong and jazz when they think of New Orleans music. However, I believe this part of the story is referencing more recent New Orleans music, specifically Lil Wayne, Drake, and their record company, Cash Money Records. All right, here it goes. Drake released a song called How About Now in 2014, and one of his proteges who accompanies him on songs is called Smiley. A grand idea could be referring to $1,000 cash, or in this case, Cash Money Records, and Drake is on record as saying he loves New Orleans and even filmed his music video for the hit song In My Feelings a couple of buildings down from the Spotted Cat Music Club. Now you may remember, I linked clues to the Spotted Cat in my previous Simpsons themed episode. So what about Lil Wayne? How does he tie into the story? Well, Lil Wayne is the artist that really established Cash Money Records as a major force in the music industry. In addition, let's look at this image the author includes on page 217 of the Froakie and the Greninja. The Froakie seems to be making the shape of an L and a W with his hands. This could be the initials of Lil Wayne. Also, the caption of the photo is Artistic Interpretations of a Froakie and Greninja. An actual Froakie and Greninja look like this. So why the difference? Well, in the case of the Froakie, I think the teardrop shape that appears on his chest is a reference to the teardrop face tattoos that Lil Wayne is known for. Tattoos are a form of artistic interpretations, just like the caption says. Now, after doing a bit of research, I discovered that the original offices of Cash Money Records were located where the Canopy by Hilton New Orleans downtown hotel is today. Here's the hotel in relationship to the Elk Place streetcar stop. In fact, Cash Money's offices were on the 5th floor of the building, which might be why the Greninja has a Roman numeral 5 on his chest. Now, if you get a chance, I recommend that you download and listen to Lil Wayne's album, The Carter 5. If you're like me, and you love songs about Renaissance paintings featuring Kendrick Lamar, then you probably will be nodding your head in agreement along to the music. All right, still not convinced? All right, don't worry, there's more. On page 217, the author makes a number of references to how hot it was when they got to their hiking spot. He writes, "When we arrived at our hiking spot, the weather was sweltering. Maybe high summer wasn't the best time to hide this treasure after all, I thought to myself. The air felt hotter than a Charizard's breath." Now this could be another Lil Wayne reference, who was part of the Hot Boys along with BG, Juvenile, and Turk. And the Charizard mention could be a reference to, get this, a fire drake, which is a fire-breathing dragon from mythology. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. On my next video, I'll return to the introduction of part 2 of the book and explain why I think the second paragraph of the intro might actually be a Doctor Who reference that leads us to this bar.